Thank you for coming out tonight. This is the Maquoketa Fiber Town Hall meeting, and my name is Curtis Dean, and I'm one of a group of telecommunications consultants that were hired by Maquoketa Municipal Electric Utility to come to Maquoketa and explore the possibility of a municipally community-owned fiber broadband network. And the piece of that we're doing right now is exactly what we're doing here tonight. Learning from people, talking to the people in the community and finding out what their needs are, if they feel there's a need for something better, and just getting feedback. As I said, I'm Curtis Dean, and I've been in the telecom business for about 18 years. I worked at Spencer Municipal Utilities in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we built a community broadband network there. And I saw a project that went from 0 customers to within 5 to 6 years having probably 70% of all the people in town hooked up to the community-owned network. It wasn't always easy, but it was very successful and still is to this day. In fact, so successful that in Spencer, they're actually rebuilding their network now to build the same kind of network that you would build from the ground up if you started here in Maquoketa, and that's all fiber optics. Introduced and involved in municipal and city projects and community projects for a very long time. So, Eric, thanks for being here. Eric's going to talk a little bit later about technology without getting too deep into the weeds, of course, because we're all of us here, except for him, don't have all those technical chops. Todd Kielkopf is another member of our team, and Todd is formerly worked for the city of Indianola. He was the Indianola electric utility manager for a number of years, and he is now doing consulting on both telecommunications and energy projects here in the Midwest. And Todd has a deep background in the types of work you have to do to put together a brand new utility like he did when he was in Indianola. We have another partner, Ken Demlow, and Ken's not here tonight, but Ken works with a company called Newcom Communications. They're out of Des Moines, and they build these types of networks. So they actually go out and they put fiber in the ground and they design them along with people like Eric to build these networks. So Ken and Eric are kind of our technical brains. Ken's also really good on things like economic development issues and community development issues, along with Todd. And I just herd cats. That's what I always tell people. My job is just try to get everybody in the right place. So to give you a little idea of what we're going to talk about tonight, here's kind of our working agenda for this evening. We got the introductions out of the way. We're going to talk a little bit about what we mean by community broadband. We're also going to talk a little bit about why that's important for Maquoketa. Access to good broadband is important to every community, including Maquoketa, and we'll talk a little bit about what are the factors that make it important in this world. Eric's going to spend just a few minutes talking about why fiber optics is what you would do if you're building a network today, and why it's superior to the other types of telecommunications and broadband networks out there. And then the main reason we're here tonight, and the reason we're going to try to keep our prepared remarks short, is we want to hear from you. We want to have discussion with you, the folks that live here in Maquoketa, and find out what you think of this concept. Before I go on, I also want to introduce Tom Gaffigan. Tom is the MMEU manager, and I've known Tom for a long, long time. And also in the back of the room, nobody puts baby in the back of the room, but Loris is in the back of the room. That's Loris Herrig, and Loris is the city administrator in Bellevue, and I asked him to cruise down tonight because Bellevue is an example of a community really close to you that has a fiber optic network in the ground today that is owned by the community and is returning a lot of great benefits to their citizens. So he'll be there if you're looking for the perspective of somebody who's been doing it since 2008. All right. So what is community broadband? I thought the best way to illustrate this is to play a short video that was prepared by some folks at an organization called the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. How many of you have been on? I think some of you have probably been on the Facebook page. I've been the one that's been kind of curating that. So if you're wondering who is that, the guy behind the mask, that's me. And I've used a lot of the resources because this organization, it's a nonprofit organization out of Minnesota, and one of their main focuses is on community broadband networks. They did a video about the community fiber network in Sandy, Oregon. And we have to do a little technical dipsy-doodle here to get this to work, but I'm going to switch inputs and we're going to watch a little video about that. It's only about 8 minutes long, but I think it does a really good job of showing what kind of community needs are addressed in building a community-owned network.
A small Oregon city between Mount Hood and Portland built its own gigabit fiber network. This is a lesson in local self-reliance and what a determined community can do.
We have 2 tiers, 100 megs for $39.95 a month, and a gig for $59.95 with no contracts, no bandwidth caps. You know, here it is, and oh, by the way, that's up and down, and there's no gotchas on it.
The Chamber of Commerce has been very supportive of SandyNet, and particularly of the fiber. I think they can actually see how it can benefit all the businesses.
SandyNet came and they talked to us, and they gave us a deal we couldn't refuse.
Coming out here and getting on SandyNet and upgrading to the fiber and realizing the cost is half of what I was paying was a great surprise, for sure.
So it really began out of a need. The story we always tell is we couldn't get a DSL line at City Hall, and this was back in 2001. So we literally called the phone company at the time and said, we want broadband, and they said, sorry, we don't have it. So the mindset was, well, if that's what they're telling the city, the city government, what are they telling our residents, and what are we going to do about this problem? We had just done our first wireless deployment. It worked really well, and City Council gave us the direction of deploy that citywide. So over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, we built a wireless system that covered the entirety of Sandy as well as some of the outlying areas, and just we're adding customers as fast as we could sign them up.
The demands on the internet were just too great, and the decision was made to upgrade to a fiber optic network.
We're using the fiber in a lot of other ways to drive economic development. We have a perfect example here recently of a 5-building complex where a company has 5 different buildings throughout town and in our industrial park, and we're able to provide them a very cheap quote for bringing in their own connected network throughout town.
Really fast. I think at that time it was 100 megabit per second connection for probably an eighth of the cost of what we were getting. So we were going to get 10 times faster than what we could have gotten before for a fraction of the cost. It's a no-brainer. It was a win for us.
Being in real estate, I encounter a lot of people that have very specific internet needs, people that do work from home primarily, and in the outskirts of Sandy where internet is not as available, that's a big concern for a lot of people, and some people even choose to live closer to town because of it.
We've got 5 municipally owned buildings throughout the city for the various departments, and we saw huge benefit to being able to connect those with our own institutional network and have fiber connectivity directly between each. There's nothing like the reliability of fiber. In fact, that particular line's been in service for almost 8 years now without a single outage. This fiber just never goes down. Once we had all the city buildings connected with fiber, we immediately realized savings of in the phone system costs. We were able to deploy a new phone system institutionally. It also enabled better communication within the sites, so we've got better utilization of staff resources.
We hooked up a way for our officers to appear via video streaming service to the grand jury in Oregon City.
Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Our officers now come locally here to our police station. They're told what time to appear. They appear, testify, and then they're finished typically in less than an hour. So it saves us fuel costs, it saves us time.
Our highway that goes right through the center of town is owned by ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, because it's a state highway, Highway 26. As it's going through town, all the lights, the traffic lights, are owned by them. But none of them are connected. The lights aren't timed through the highway. We have a lot of lights. We went and met with them and said, hey, we have a conduit system. We put in the conduit up to all your traffic lights, and we would like to give that to you. They'll be able to monitor those from their main central command center down in Portland, and if they need to change something, they don't have to drive out here 30 miles and work on it, drive back and realize it didn't work. They can just do that in real live time. This is a livability issue for us.
I think that one benefit from having it, and I would say this is a major benefit of having your network owned by the citizens of the city of Sandy, is that your governing board, your city council, is the board of that service as well. You may run into someone on the governing board at the grocery store. They may live down the street from you.
We did an extensive amount of forecasting and figuring out, where the budgets were going to lie for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years before we made that decision to go out for a $7.5 million revenue bond, because, for me, I'm just a normal guy. I don't make a lot of money, and to borrow something with that many zeros on the end of it was very intimidating. It's been an adjustment to sign these huge invoices for construction and, put my name on a $1 million invoice or $1 million plus invoices as we've seen these construction bills come through over the past 7 months.
We did not use taxpayers' dollars because we didn't feel it was right for everyone to have to pay for something that maybe not everyone was going to participate in. We looked at it as we could pay for it through revenue generated through use.
At the end of the day, I have confidence in the numbers. I have confidence that the take rate that we're seeing is exceeding what we actually modeled for. So we're pretty comfortable that this is going to be a financially viable project, and we'll be able to cover those debt services costs over the course of the 20 years.
The fiber for us is not the end game. It's just now that we can start the race.
It's just really cool. So I enjoy being able to be a part of something that it's like I tell my team at SandyNet, we're developing something here that's going to impact this city for the next 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even into the next century. This really is kind of like the power grid was in the early 1900s. We're changing the way that the community is going to interact with the outside world and within the community itself. So there's just something satisfying about being able to build something that at the end of the day is going to impact people for generations.
That's an example of one community, probably similar in size to Maquoketa, not anywhere close to us, but that did a project like this. And there's certainly lots of examples to talk about. In general, though, we talk about community broadband. It's a telecommunications infrastructure that's citizen-owned and controlled. So here in Maquoketa, you have examples of citizen-owned and controlled infrastructure already. Electricity is an example of that. 100 years ago, or whenever the municipal electric system was founded, it was founded because there was concern that this new invention of electricity would not be available to citizens of Maquoketa unless the community did it for themselves. So that's exactly what they did. And there are 500 or 600 municipal electric utilities around the country. So it's a model that's been used successfully in lots of places. Telecommunications has become to us in this century what electricity was 100 years ago. In other words, we can't live without it. We're getting to the point where we can't live without it, and we can't do business without it. We can't have a successful quality of life. We can't generate jobs, etc. And because it's owned and controlled by the community, people Those decisions are made locally, and they're not made at somewhere out of state in a corporate office somewhere. You know, one thing that's very important to remember is big cable and telephone companies, they're not bad guys, okay? They're not trying to be mean or charge you more than they should just because they can. The financial model that they're created under, the business model they're under, doesn't allow them to do anything differently. You know, those companies can't afford to invest money in every community they have at once, because if they did, their stock price would go down, everybody'd sell their stock, and they'd go out of business. Because they're privately owned and because they're for profit, they have to run it differently than a community-owned project would have to do. So, and because it's community-owned, those decisions, the buck stops within your city limits. And it is a growing national trend. There's 150 plus communities right now. This little map it's kind of cluttered, but it does show you all of the little S's and G's you see there are different community broadband networks across the country. The growing trend now is fiber networks, but a lot of the networks that were built 10 to 20 years ago started out as what we call hybrid fiber coax. So there was some fiber network, and then they would go to coaxial to actually deliver services like your cable company does today. But all the new networks that are being built in 2016 are being built with fiber all the way to the home or the business. Here in Iowa, we've had a really big success story. Iowa is one of the states that has as many municipally owned, community-owned broadband networks as anybody in the country. And we have some examples like Bellevue right here in your corner of the state. Also over by Cedar Falls, you have Cedar Falls, Independence, Grundy Center, Rhinebeck. Waverly is right now a perfect example. They're right now building their fiber to the home network. And Tom was just sharing with me before he started, he was talking to their manager, and they just started hooking people up in July. They got 150 hooked up, and how many on the waiting list? 1,300 on the waiting list in Waverly, and it's only going to grow. I can speak to experience in Spencer. The hardest part about our project was we couldn't build it fast enough. People couldn't wait for it to get hooked up. So in Iowa, we've got quite a few community-owned broadband networks. The important thing about that for Maquoketa is that you don't operate in a vacuum. You're going to be part of a community of other community leaders in other cities, many of which are similar in size to Maquoketa, that have experience in the business, and you don't have to repeat the mistakes they already made. You learn from each other, and we have a lot of networking that goes on with this group. And I'll talk a little bit in just a few minutes about a particular project that we're working on that would actually interconnect some of these communities so that they can share resources and lower costs. So broadband is a word we kick around, and you know, the word broadband means many things to many people. I think of a lot of people, when they think of the term broadband, they think of just internet, but really any service that rides over that pipe is considered part of broadband. It's internet service, it's cable TV service, it's phone service. And there is a difference between quality and not quality. And it's not all speed, and it's not all cost, and it's not all those factors. There's a bunch of different factors to go into whether broadband service is good. And this is my list, so others might add new criteria to this. But I think it has to be fast. I think it really needs to be reliable. It needs to be affordable, because if it's not affordable, you can't afford it, you don't buy it, it's doing you no good. And it needs to be available within your community everywhere. Now, different companies have really good strengths in some of these areas and weaknesses in other areas, okay? And what you want to try to do, and certainly if you build a community network, what you want to do is cross off all four of those boxes. I want a network that is fast, meaning you can have as much speed as you need, and you might pay a little more if you want a lot, but you're going to have as much as you need. It's reliable. It means it's not going to slow down right when you need it. It's not going to go off 3 or 4 times a month. It's affordable in that it's, the average home and business can afford a broadband service, and there aren't areas of the community where you just can't get it, because each of those criteria, many large companies fail today in various areas around the world. And it's very important that a community has access to good broadband. It matters for a number of reasons. First of all, it really matters for education. I met with some of the folks at the community school district and the community college this morning, and we talked a little bit about that. The school buildings themselves they feel like they've got pretty good broadband, and they've done some really smart things, like they have redundant connections, so if somebody puts a shovel through one line, it's still on. But one of their concerns is, are the community's kids getting access to broadband when they need it? Because it's not like when we were kids, when you sat down with a book and a piece of paper and did your homework, right? A lot of this stuff is online now. A lot of it is not just viewing online content, it's creating content and uploading that through the web. So it needs to be fast, it needs to be reliable, because you could have the fastest internet in the world, and when your son goes to file their homework assignment and it's down, now you got a problem, Mom. You got a problem, Dad. It's time to go to McDonald's. It's time to go to the library. It's time to go somewhere and get online so your kid can finish their homework. It matters for jobs, and increasingly it matters for jobs. Every business today, I'll take that back. Not every business today is using the internet, but they should be. And the ones that aren't using it are probably leaving money on the table. Small businesses are using it for anything as simple as checking emails and building a website and maintaining it, all the way up to ordering all their inventory online, doing all cloud computing, those sorts of things that not only create new revenue for their business, but it also gives them more time to do other things like talk to customers. And those people employ people. The bigger employers, manufacturers, those sorts of folks, are really leaning more and more on reliable broadband service. And I hear horror stories all over the place about economic development leaders that have a new employer that they're trying to bring to town. It's going to bring some really good jobs, but they choose not to go there because the telecommunications companies that they have in town either make it so difficult or so expensive to connect that they go somewhere else where they can get a better price and faster and more reliable connectivity. And it also matters for those, how many in this room work from home at least part of the time? Okay? That's frustrating if your internet goes down and you're not generating revenue for your business. You are your business, right? So you need reliable broadband, and those are the kinds of jobs that we're going to see more and more of as time goes on. More home-based businesses, more people that maybe have an office but they work from home 2 or 3 days a week, and broadband is essential for those folks. Healthcare is going to become, probably in the next 20 or 30 years, even more important than it's ever been as far as electronics and technology, because most healthcare organizations are rapidly moving toward e-health or virtual health care. I have a friend of mine that works for the United States Veterans Administration, and her job is to drive around the state of Iowa and go to veterans' homes and hook the veterans up to these remote devices. She calls it the $1 million briefcase, and it's got blood pressure cuff and blood sugar monitor and all this stuff. And she's not a nurse or anything. She just has been trained on how to use this technology, and that veteran can now get that health care in their home, and they can even have a consult with the doctor without driving clear to the VA hospital in Des Moines or one of the other ones. And that's because the technology makes it available. She's also talked about sometimes that's more difficult in some areas, because if the service isn't good, then it's not quite as easy to do. Quality of life, I think, is the #1 reason that many communities decide to invest in a community broadband network. And what I mean for quality of life is that we want more families like this to move to our communities or move back to our communities. Why? Because they have children, and those children go to our schools, and we get more state aid, our enrollment goes up, tax base is better because they're buying stuff in town, they bought a house. And increasingly, young couples are choosing not to live in areas or communities where they can't have access to really, really good broadband. And they might choose to live in another community. I don't beat up on Loris for this, but they may decide they're going to live in Bellevue because they can get a 100 meg internet connection that runs all the time and it's 100% reliable, and that would be iffy here. And so they might choose another community if they don't have the broadband they need. And this is only going to get more and more. The average home is consuming more and more and more content. One of the things that a lot of providers will tell you, big boys especially, is, well, you don't need a 100 meg service. You don't need a gigabyte. You don't need this. Well, in a way, it's true. There's really not that many single things you do that use all that bandwidth. But what happens in your home is you're not doing one thing. You're doing 20 things, and they're all using the internet in this day and age. You know, you've got maybe a kid or two on their iPads streaming Netflix or whatever. Mom's trying to video chat with grandma, and you start adding these things up, and the amount of bandwidth the average home is consuming is rapidly increasing. Overall internet use is going up 43% a year, and that's been pretty consistent over the past several years. So the average home today may not need a gigabit, but it will be needing a gigabit in the not so distant future, and that's the kind of capability that a fiber network would be built in with. This is just a little quick chart to show you how rapidly internet traffic is growing, and a lot of it is video right now. How many of you have cut the cable cord? There's a few people out there. Yeah, and that's a viable way to get entertainment now, right? But if the internet's not working or it's too slow, it's not as viable of a way to get your entertainment. So again, we go back to our ideal family here now. They want to buy a house. This survey in 2014 by a research firm found that having a fiber connection to that home adds between $5,000 to $6,000 value to a $300,000 home. Here in Maquoketa, your home values are probably lower, so you can do the math there, maybe 3 to 5%. Still pretty good boost if you're selling a home. And if you're renting, and more younger people are choosing to rent than own, they're willing to pay a premium on their rent to get that. So quality of life issues are really a big part of what we're talking about in the future. I'm going to turn the microphone on and hand it over to Eric Lampland, who knows more about the internet or has forgotten more about technology than most of us know. And he's going to talk a little bit about what fiber optics is about and where this thing would take us.
You know, before I get too far down the path on fiber optics, I'd just like to say, did Curtis's presentation engender some questions that you want asked right away?
Yeah, you don't have to hold your responses till later. Yes, absolutely. We're gonna bring the mic over to you because we're recording, and we want to make sure we get everybody's questions and responses on there.
What?
It's on.
With this, would technical terms, would you have to re-dig up everything like what they're doing for the streetscaping to put the fiber optic network in?
There are a couple of approaches that people use for constructing a fiber network. Sometimes we put it underground, and actually there's some preferences to that. The other approach is to put it on telephone poles, and generally that's most often motivated because it's about a third of the cost of putting it in under the ground, right? So it gets you. Oh, you've got some fiber. Ah, good. Pass that around.
How many strands are in something we look at?
Okay. So in terms of construction, you've got either of those approaches. And once you do feasibility studies and determine the actual costs and the builds, then you elect one of those approaches. The 12-strand that Tom just brought out is sort of a basic unit that we all do in fiber optics, and so you find either 12 strands, and you really only need one strand for connecting any given house, right? But down the street, as we go past multiple houses, you'll have multiple strands in that distribution fiber, as we call it, right? And then connecting you to the larger world, this particular project that we are currently involved, that we'd like to have Maquoketa think about seriously, is going to have 144 strands, and those simple counts don't truly represent exactly what happens with fiber optics, because fiber optics uses light. And in this room, looking at all of you, there is light all over the place. It's bouncing off your shirts, and there's a green light over there and a blue light next to it and a red light right here, and light is that way. So the color of something is also known as its frequency in terms of light. And I can actually put multiple colors on a given fiber strand. So today's technology limits us to about 96 of those wavelengths on a given strand. Each of those wavelengths might go 10 billion bits per second, so that's about 9.6 trillion bits per second. Now, to put that in some comparison sense, most of the copper infrastructures that we have today sort of peak out as you get towards 100 megabits. So it's 100 million bits is the fastest they can go, and about 10 trillion bits per second is about the fastest you can go. So it's a significant difference, right?
Funny you should mention that, Eric. I have a little graphic that kind of illustrates what that means. And so this circle, think of the circle, the surface area of the circle is its bandwidth. So how much data you could put through that. So that's how big a 150 megabyte internet connection would look like. And to my knowledge, that's the largest service you can get in Maquoketa right now from, I believe Mediacom has that. This is the size of that same pipe, so to speak, for a gigabit, which is 1,000 megabits. This is the size of a pipe if it's 10 gigabits. Now, 1 gigabit, that's real easy to do over fiber. They've been doing it for years to homes and businesses. 10 gigabits, also pretty normal. And then we got the future, which is 40 gigabits, and the technology is being rolled out right now that would allow you to do 40 gigabits per second to a home or a business over one fiber, and that's the same fiber that you would put in the ground. And as time goes on, as the technology changes, the software changes, the lasers change, you can keep pushing more and more and more through the same piece of glass that's in the ground. So.
And actually, in the design that we did for Maquoketa, were you to join us, the interconnection to the rest of the world to you would be two entirely physically diverse paths. In other words, you can't just cut one of them, okay, because the other one will keep you alive, right? So it's a reliability factor, and that runs at 100 gigabits per second. Is the connection to you. So a lot of capacity for your community, and ultimately a lot of capacity to your homes. As you begin to need more and more and more of it, which over the last 15 years, Curtis was saying we're growing at 43% a year. That has not changed for the last 15 years, and it's projected to even increase more as we get to additional resolutions on video and some other stuff that we can get into if you're curious. But those are the kind of speed issues. Really what it's saying to you is that with fiber optics, you do not have a concern about how fast you can go. It's just really a question of establishing service agreements for all of you to run a sustainable environment, and you can upgrade those speeds as you need to without having to replace the infrastructure.
It's as close to future-proof as we can identify today. And one of the things that often comes up when people are thinking about this, oh yeah, this is great, but what about wireless? And why can't we do all this through wireless technology? Well, you know, wireless does some amazing things in this day and age we live in, and A lot of us have smartphones, and you can surf the web and do all kinds of things on that. But the thing you got to remember is it's never going to be wireless all the way. It's always going to go to a fiber connection. And the next generation of wireless, which they're calling 5G, they're going to need antennas all over the place. And those antennas are going to need fiber optics connections. And if a community like Maquoketa builds its own fiber network, then it can serve those towers, those radios, as opposed to another provider possibly serving them. So it will not only improve the access to wired service in your home or business, but also it will help your community be able to perform well when it comes to wireless service in the future.
5G that Curtis mentioned is a wireless communications standard that we expect to be standardized in about 2 or 3 years. It's not quite here yet, at least as far as the determinations. Verizon is doing a test next year for 5G point-to-point tests. They get maybe 300 feet from that access point to the other, as long as it's line of sight and so forth and so on. There is no intention on the part of any of the wireless manufacturers or wireless vendors, and AT&T, or Verizon, and so forth, to do wireless in rural America. It's all aimed at dense living communities in Chicago or New York or wherever the case may be. However, if you have a fiber to the home network, you're perfectly capable of implementing that technology, should you wish to.
And
I see a question.
Yeah. I'm going to wait for you there, big guy. There you go. Thank you.
So if we were to bring in, say, fiber optics communications in Maquoketa, one of the ideas I never really thought about was, say, how you're talking about the veterans, they be able to talk to their doctors and so on and so forth, which I think is a great option. If it was set up and find all these different tools that we can use it for, would there be costs to say something? Have other cities put a cost on that, or is that just something that they just kind of goes with it?
Well, I can give you one cost and an experience that we were working with in a northern Minnesota town, and their fiber build looked like it would be about $4 million to construct it in their community. They had a regional hospital that was located in that town as well, and the regional hospital contributed $800,000 of the $4 million for that build. So I sat with the CEO of that hospital on a couple of occasions, and I asked him, what motivated you to do $800,000? Where did you get that number, et cetera, et cetera? He says, that's what it costs me to send nurses out every year to people, okay? If we've got this network, I don't have to send nurses out there. I can actually do high-resolution imaging between the home and the hospital, and I save that kind of money.
So basically other parts of the city get involved because they realize that it's going to save them a ton of money, and they can communicate through the computer and not have to get in their car, drive, and make it a big inconvenience for people that are already sick, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. I'm getting on in years, and, sooner or later I'm not going to want to get out of my house and go to the doctor, and having that capability is really kind of nice for a guy like.
I just know there's a lot of vets in town that have to drive all the way to Iowa City to meet with their doctors, and sometimes the doctor's not ready for them, so they got to drive all the way back, and then they got to do it again next week. And it would be a lot easier if they could just stay, if they're sick and they're in pain, it'd just be a lot easier if you stay at home, or maybe come up to the hospital in Maquoketa, communicate that way, so that way they ain't lugging back and forth, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with vets, because a lot of them have got physical disabilities that make that work really hard, right? One of the most wonderful things I heard a few years ago was that there were some people in the audience that were interested in this fiber network, and I went to one of them, and she was deaf, and she supported people who were deaf, and she said, I need this absolutely, because voice doesn't make any difference to my people. I've got to have sign language, and it has to be real, okay? So a lot of, when you start unwrapping this as to what is potential, it's really quite amazing, right?
I've been told that we need to have the microphones closer to us when we talk, so I'll just keep that in mind. Todd, you wanted to add something too?
Yeah, and it's, Unity Point and Mercy are also doing this telemedicine. So this is, I mean, we've seen the demonstrations, and these are HIPAA compliant systems that allows the doctor and you to be in virtual rooms and actually have a medical appointment that is insurable. And that's kind of the difference is some of the systems now that they're first coming out with, people are voluntarily paying, not turning that doctor's visit into an insurance just for the convenience. Okay, now you translate that model knowing that people will pay, and you start looking at your retirement communities who would maybe join an association with the municipal utility. So this gets back to your question, can you charge? Yes. You can have a group that allows retirement community members to collect fees from the families who want that to use that same platform, and Unity Point will actually rent your utility that platform.
Kind of make it a community.
You can make these things, and because of the home rule authority the utilities have in Iowa, yes, you can have add-on services that benefit the community's economy that's tailored to your own community.
And you get to decide that, not somebody else. Tom, we had another question right here. Here you go.
No, I was just going to add that I work for the city water department, and we do something like this. Now we have SCADA systems throughout town for our lift stations and our water plant. And one of the ways that we used the internet is we have to have a company come in and work on our systems sometimes, and we actually have it set up now where they can access it remotely, and that saves a trip charge, saves the city money, but there are things that they cannot do because the system's not fast enough. You know, so that's just an example there.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions at this time? Because we want this to be your meeting. Absolutely.
You know, what do the lines on your map there signify? And also, could we, if we start building this, could we expect pushback from the big telecoms like we had in 2005 when they lobbied to change state law to make it illegal for us to be allowed to do this? And they sent out all these fake taxpayer rights group placards, like political advertising, to lobby us to vote no for them to be able to change the law. So much so that the city eventually sent out this letter warning us of the subterfuge they were trying to pull.
Can I see that letter? I might have helped write that. I was involved in that in my Spencer days. So, Eric, do you want to address the lines on the map, and I'll talk about the subterfuge?
Sure. So, the Iowa Fiber Alliance is a concept that we're putting together now to interconnect 13 different cities in Iowa. Okay. It was initially called the Northeast Pilot Project because it is intended to be expandable, okay, that will add more cities as cities come on board. But one of the costs that is involved in providing you internet is what we call a peering cost. And that is a cost that you pay to the bigger providers, what we call Tier 1 providers. Tier 1 providers have global networks, so they are people like Verizon, AT&T, Cable and Wireless, those type of people. So when you do your internet connectivity, you might be talking to a machine in California, or you might be talking to one in Chicago, or you might be talking to one in Germany, wherever that might be. You have to have a way of getting from here to there, okay? The cost of doing that transit has been a real hurdle for most rural communities. There are people who actually make a business of that. And so when we looked at this, we said, what are people paying? Loris, you want to tell us your bad story?
Well, wait for the mic, Loris. Loris doesn't mind us telling stories about him because of the issues he's had.
When Bellevue first started out, we had very limited options for connectivity. And so our cost per meg was as high as $198, $200 a meg for us to get connectivity. Those costs now have gotten down to $6 a meg, and we're looking at with the Iowa Fiber Alliance, we'd actually get down to do cents per meg.
26 cents is what we're looking at. Okay.
And so one of the problems that we ran into as a smaller community, we just didn't have a lot of options. You know, if you look at Bellevue, and everybody knows where Bellevue's at on the map, we're not on the way to anything. We're at the end of the road. And so even the Iowa Fiber Alliance, you can see on that map, they're not going through Bellevue to get anywhere. They're coming to Bellevue to get to us. And it's just not a lot of options. On Maquoketa, on the other hand, is on a 4-lane Highway 61. You're sort of on the way to some spots. If you look at that map, there's some other cities that benefit because they're on the way to somewhere else. I don't have a bridge in Bellevue, so when you get to Bellevue, that's as far as it goes. Yeah. And so it's difficult for a small town like a Bellevue to, when you start doing cash flows, you know, when we first started our system, we started with 10 meg for the entire community. That was our capacity for the community. And you think about that, and it's like, can you believe that we started with 10 meg? And we were the upgraded system, okay? Because before that it was DSL, and a lot of it was being run over copper, which we talked about. Most of our customers, when we first had internet in Bellevue, it was a long-distance call to be on the internet. So I'd call somebody's house, and their line would be busy, okay? I don't know if you guys have had that experience in Maquoketa years ago. But you'd say, well, they must be on the internet. So you were paying for the internet plus a long-distance call. And you think about it today, it's like, wow, people really lived back then? You younger people, it's like, oh, yeah, we even had phones back then that were hung on a wall. So that's why the costs have become a lot more competitive. And I would encourage, that's why I'm here tonight to say, and Tom's very future-looking, representing your municipal utility, but I'd encourage you guys to look at those options because it's an opportunity to get on the ground floor of something that's really good for your community.
So that's what those lines are about. That's 144 strands of fiber optics. It's being built with what is now the latest in technology, and I won't bore you with that, but I will tell you that this technology that is coming forward, now being implemented by almost all the carriers in the world, is the most disruptive technology I have seen since we built the internet. And Laura, just to make you feel bit better, when I was at the University of Minnesota building the internet, we had first 1, then 2, and by the time I was leaving, 3 T1 lines. That's 1.5 meg, okay? They connected us to Chicago, okay? And that was what it was, the state of the art in about 1994, okay? So we really are consuming an awful lot more bandwidth now, right? In the 100 gig range and so forth and so on. But that's what we did for supporting the whole state of Minnesota. So things change, right? Now this one actually is going to support capacity up to about 8 trillion bits per second around that ring.
And one of the things to note too is that to play off of something Laura said, this network, if we're able to build this, is not only going to lower the cost for any of these participating communities to be able to get on the internet, but it's also going to allow a whole lot of sharing of other services. If you built a broadband network 20 years ago, you would have spent about, in the case of Spencer, we spent about $4 million to put in satellite dishes to pick up signals and antennas and all that stuff to be able to be a cable TV company. And those costs, the local costs, would not necessarily need to happen in a case like a Maquoketa, because through this network, you've got a willing partner like a Cedar Falls Utilities that has video and is willing to and already is providing video services to other providers, not only municipals, but other telephone companies. You have others in this ring, like Muscatine, that also provide video to other companies, not just municipals, but telephone companies. So the idea of this network, whatever scale it ends up getting built, will reduce the cost to build and operate a local network in places like Maquoketa and Dyke and Vinton and Charles City and New Hampton and Decorah that don't have a network today. So it'll make it easier for the math to work out for them in the future.
Yes.
One of the biggest concerns that I've heard, I was kind of asking around just with what people were paying for cable and internet, like in town, and it's anywhere running from $100 to $120 to $140 a month.
For internet.
For internet and cable with Mediacom, and I know they're not satisfied with the services that they're getting. So with this fiber optics thing, about how much would they have to pay for internet and all that stuff per month? Like,
well, that's a decision that I think you all should participate in. We can tell you what the costs are.
Like the overall cost.
The overall costs.
Okay.
And you can determine, perhaps with Tom's guidance and so forth, as to what the services should be. Now, having ducked that question, let me give you something more real.
I was just gonna call you on
it. When you look at those service costs, the first question is, what are you getting for that $120, right? In Kansas City, Google implemented a fiber to the home network and shocked everybody by developing service pricing that was significantly below service providers. So in Kansas City and in most of the advanced municipal networks, a gigabit of service cost about $70. A gigabit of service with video costs about $120, okay? So when I was here last October speaking to Tom's board, I asked the board what kind of services they were getting here in Maquoketa, and they were telling me, one gentleman was telling me that he got all of 1.5 meg. So he gets 1.5 meg on 1.5 million bits per second for a price like you're suggesting, as versus 1,000 meg for a price that's lower than what he was paying, right? So, you know, it is hard to actually look at just the cost. And the reason that it's hard to look at just the cost is that there are so many new services that come along with it. People cut the cord and don't do linear broadcast anymore. You know, I haven't done that for 6 years. I have more content to watch than I'll ever have time to watch it, right? But I need capacity on my internet connection to make that happen. If I were doing the remote health care that we were talking about, I need capacity on the internet connection to be able to do that. So most communities who are in the advanced stage are less than 100 meg or $100 a month, $120 a month for everything. Okay? But for everything, we're talking about a gigabit service, not a couple hundred meg or something like that. Okay? Does that help?
Basically, you're getting 10 times the service and more data travel for a little bit less than what we're paying now.
Right.
It's twice as good service, and plus that, from what I understand it, say if we do get this better service, there's a way to negotiate that down even a little bit cheaper than the 100 than what we were paying. So instead of paying the same amount with more service, we might be able to get it a lot cheaper with a lot more
right.
cable.
So when I was looking at your possible service portfolio, I just invented some prices, right? Because we don't have them yet, right? And I said, okay, the lowest service package that we should deliver is 25 megabit service. And the reason that we say that's the smallest service you should have is that is what the Federal Communications Commission says is the minimum that you should have. And I said, for that, we should charge them $20 a month. Okay? At 50 meg, maybe $40 a month. At 100 meg, maybe $50 a month. So that's the sense of it. Okay?
So like the cables could handle, say, like 1,000 megabits or whatever.
Yeah.
That would be the higher price end of it if you really want to run that 1,000 megabytes through. If you only want to run 25 millibyte or gigabytes through, it would be a significant amount less.
Yes.
Long story.
Well, plus TV. But
yeah, plus TV.
If you want, yeah, if you want TV.
if you're doing over the top, that you don't have that cost, right? Now, some of the things that come into play here is that we've always bought on the basis of this business of speed, okay? And I'm a techie guy. I know what that really means, right? But most people don't have any idea what 100 megabits versus the gigabit is and why they would need which, right?
I'm one of those guys.
Okay, great. Okay, I can give you some sense of why you need that, right? Let me give you an idea of one. Right now, the hottest selling consumer item at stores last Christmas was a thing called 4K TVs. That's the new TV standard, and 8K is coming out after that, and we have to quit at that point because the human eye can only see 7.2K, okay? So 8K, we're done, you know? It's not going to change anymore. But at 8K, we're looking at each other, okay, like this, right? Like we're right here, okay? At 4K, it's pretty good. So what's the difference? A lot of you have high-definition TV, and that's really kind of 1K, okay, if you will. And that takes 10 to 12 megabits a second. When you get to, so if you've got 3 TVs, you need about 30 megabits to have them all working together, and hopefully nobody turns on the PC at the same time, right? Or you get one of those little circles of death, you know, drives me crazy. But at a 4K level, you're talking 80 to 90 meg a second. So for 3 TVs, you're up around 300 meg for that requirement, plus somebody uses a tablet or TV. I don't know if those kinds of numbers help you at all, okay? But that's what's happening in terms of capacity. And of course, 4K, we think of that as video, like a television show, but really that resolution standard is going to show up on web pages, is going to show up on different other places where you just naturally go because that's the way technology happens. Does that help?
That helps.
It's going to show up on on eHealth too, because to be able to do really high resolution imaging at a distance, you got to have high resolution imaging. This one should be on.
I see.
Oh, that's okay. I just realized I never answered your second question. What will happen? Well, the experience in the past has been when a community decides to build its own broadband network, that the incumbent providers will work to try to protect their market, right? 100% understandable. They will work very hard to try to keep people to stay with them as a provider rather than switch to the new company. And so that effort usually takes place like in the types of ads that you've seen. What we haven't seen a brand new community broadband network launched except for Waverly in several years. Waverly has not seen a huge uptick in competitive attacks from the providers there. And when there were 2 communities last fall that had elections, so those campaign ads you saw that run by the Iowa Taxpayers Association, which was actually funded by a couple of big companies, those ads were not run when both Vinton and Decorah did their elections to authorize the utility. In fact, they had 0 opposition from the telephone and cable company. So I don't know if that means they've changed how they want to approach things or what, but the bottom line is competition will lower prices. Competition holds every provider's feet to the fire, and if there's competition from an incumbent provider like a Mediacom or CenturyLink or whoever, that holds Tom's feet to the fire to make sure he doesn't get lazy and operate this community network not as well as he should. So competition is good in that regard. When you look at the other municipal utilities in Iowa, almost all of them have a take rate of over 70%. And in some cases, much higher than that. So in other words, people, when they have a choice between the community-owned network and a traditional telephone or cable company, they're choosing the community network. Some of its price, a lot of its reliability, a lot of its, hometown, cheering for your hometown, right? We want more of that money to stay in town. And a lot of it is the fact that that if there is a problem, because these problems happen, there's outages, they're just going to happen. At least that there's someone that's got your back right here in your town that can go out and fix that, as opposed to, well, we'll get around to that as soon as we get 50 people out. We don't fix outages until 50 people are out, and then we'll roll a truck. So those are some of the reasons. But yeah, you'll have competition.
Kind of going off this question, I would say, would this be something that could happen? Like, everybody around here is either an Iowa or an Iowa State fan for college sports, right? And sometimes we run into blackouts where we don't get to watch the game. So if we went to, like, say, a fiber optic service, I'm like, are we subject to blackouts? Because I noticed, like, some providers like your DishNet and your DirecTV, they're always in negotiations for different channels. Sometimes they get in arguments, and then we're left without watching the game. So, like, with the fiber optics and being just going to be streamed live through the internet, would we still be subject to those blackouts and not get to see the shows and games that we want to watch?
The answer is that the most interesting service in the business right now is video. Nobody's totally sure exactly where video is going to go. And there are a lot of factors that deal with that. The CEO of Comcast said a couple of years ago that the change in video that he sees in the next 5 years will be more than what he saw in the previous 50 years. And if that gives you a sense of it. But over the top is an issue, okay? Competition in over the top is now an issue. In terms of sports, okay, many of the various different sporting organizations, like Major League Baseball has been doing over the top for a long, long time, and you can't block that out. Okay, they've got the service. You can subscribe to that and go for it. Right? It hasn't hit all of the players. Some of the things that have been happening in linear TV are what we call these skinny little packages, where people like Sony, people like Dish, people like DirecTV have assembled a package of about 20 different programs together, and they charge you $20 or $30 for that. Okay, and they've in the case of Dish, one of the big surprises was they included ESPN. Now this is ESPN over the top. No block, because the block is occurring at your head end, your video head end. So I can't swear to you, okay, that everything is going to be there. You might need the Big Ten for network for such and such, which is linear still, right? But it's moving in that direction.
Governed at a local level, though. Say if that would that be Tom's job to say, hey, Tom, we want to watch the game. You got to get us the game. So it'd kind of be at a local level.
The way it
works. I think he's a Nebraska fan, so yeah. I don't think that's a fact. No.
Well, they play every Thanksgiving, so we're at least going to get one game.
That's right. Yeah.
The blocking that occurred in the past is really a question of contracts, and those contracts are related to your video head end, right? But they don't have any relationship to your over-the-top service.
Okay.
So, as we see the sports migrate in that direction, you will be able to watch what you want, when you want, and by the way, you could probably record it, and
So basically, with fiber optics, you get that over-the-top service that.
Yeah.
Basically,
you can get it today.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of that over the content today, but it's just this is going to allow you to have more of it, a little more reliable connection. The other thing about video is a interesting business, like Eric mentioned, and some community broadband networks have chosen not to offer a video product. They've said, you know what, we're going to give you the best, fastest internet we can, and it's going to be a really reasonable cost, and you can get your video from Hulu and Netflix, and you can buy it through one of these skinny bundles like Sony. I had both the Sony product and the Dish product, and they're pretty darn good. So some community networks have made that decision. Some have said, well, people still want a traditional cable TV thing, so we're going to offer that. It's at best a break-even proposition. You may think when you pay that $70 or $80 cable bill that, dang, somebody's making a lot of money. But most of that money is going right back out the door and being paid to ABC, NBC, ESPN, all of those companies in exchange for selling their content to you. So video is kind of one of those break-even things. You do it because people expect it. The internet is the thing that is what really generates the revenue you need to pay the bills and pay for the network construction. So.
Yeah, one of our biggest problems in town is, we can only get our local access channel through Mediacom, where there's a lot of homes that do DirecTV and DishNet, and a lot of the stuff that happens here at City Hall is not getting out in the community, which causes a rift where people think stuff's going on that's really not going on, like maybe a conspiracy or rumors or whatever. So if it could help get our local Access 22 channel out, say, for our City Hall meetings, I mean, that would be a great plus.
In Lafayette, Louisiana, okay, when they built their fiber to the home network, they decided that with all that capacity on fiber, they would give for free to every citizen in the community 100 meg service. And the only time that they had to pay for something was when they were actually going to the internet, okay? Because once that fiber infrastructure is there, you can use it, right? And sure, there's a cost when you go to the internet. We were talking about that before with Loris, right? But if you're just using the fiber, give them a government broadcast. Give them something that the schools broadcast, classrooms at home for sick children that they can just look at it and so on and so forth. There are lots of options you have down the road, right?
I think Tom wanted to add something. You want to pass to him real quick? Okay.
On?
It should be on, yes.
I just actually moved back here 3 months ago. I've been gone for about 20 years, so this is great that you guys are putting this together. I actually just moved from the Joplin, Missouri area, where it's close to Chanute, Kansas, which they have done this, and Neosho Community College as well. But as far as answering your question about the blackouts and stuff like that, a lot of that is the contractual thing. It has nothing to do with your internet service, your TV service. That is just done by the leagues themselves and what have you. But the one thing I do see, I do work from home. I'm linked into a company in Denver, Colorado, and I work in my house 2 blocks up the street. I'm online all day long. I'm linked in, and the biggest thing I see as far as video is concerned is that I would say in the next 5 to 7 years, everything's going to be streaming.
Yes.
I see the satellite companies going belly up, cable companies having issues. DirecTV already has, I've had DirecTV for 22 years now, almost since they first came out of the box. And rates just go up and up and up, and I keep trying to cut. And when my next contract's done here in about 8 months, I'm done with it. Because everything I want to get, you can now get through a streaming service. And it's only going to increase for a fraction of the cost as well. So that's a big plus, and sports is a big deal with that, and you see that a lot with what ESPN launched with ESPN 360. That's why they went to that. You can get any game on ESPN online now as it is, as long as you have a provider that's linked in contractually with them now. So that's a big plus. The other thing I wanted to ask was about bandwidth, because that's a huge deal in my household. My kids hate me because of it, because I am a hawk on it. And for the last few years, we've been at 350 gigs a month. And our months where we come close going over, we have gone over it a couple of times, and I changed passwords on Netflix, and it might be 2 or 3 days where you get that password again. But what are the bandwidth caps in the future looking like is my concern, because as like I was saying, with all this with TV service going to be streaming, as far as I see it,
Yeah.
The bandwidth caps need to go away, or at least catch up to the technology that's available now.
Well, I have some really bad news for you. You know, and I'm sorry to tell you this, but there isn't a single municipal fiber to the home network that uses bandwidth caps.
Great.
Unfortunately, you can use as much as you want.
Trust me, I'll use a lot.
It's just one of those things, you know.
That's a big concern because we've had cable internet for quite a while now because of the faster download speeds.
Right.
But bandwidth has always been a major bugaboo when it comes to it.
So when you're a provider, when you're a Comcast, Mediacom, CenturyLink, that type of thing, to be able to handle this exponential growth in internet traffic, 43% a year, if you just start, you know, whipping it out, that means, you know, every 3 years you've got about 3 times the the need that you had 3 years ago, right? So if you're a provider, you not only have the issue about what connects homes and businesses in the access network, as we call it, but you also have what is going on in the that little map that was up there before that is the IFA ring. Okay, that has to be big enough to handle all the capacity. Okay, this IFA network, okay, has, as I say, we were setting it up for an initial 8 terabits worth of service, right? But that's only using 2 of the 144 fibers. So you have capacity here that will last you well beyond my death. I'll never get a chance to see how much you use, right? But it's there for you, okay? Well, sometimes, you know, it's a hard day. But the restrictions that exist in the existing infrastructure investments of major carriers is what they're installing the bandwidth caps for. Plus, of course, they get a little more money, right? So, but no municipality that I know uses bandwidth caps.
Who else in the room has to play the data cap shuffle once in a while? Yeah, I have a good friend of mine in West Des Moines, and it's almost always 4 days, 5 days before their renewal period, he has to go in and change the password on the Wi-Fi router and deny the kids their Netflix and all the other streaming because he needs to work. So and he's too cheap to upgrade to the package that has the bigger cap. So the idea here is that you can. It's like saying I'm going to run a water pipe to your house, but I'm only let you buy 10 gallons of water from me this month. No, I think the water utility would sell you as much water as you're willing to use. So.
Kind of another advantage would be there'd be a lot of parent control too over what usage in the house and so on and so forth, what the kids are watching, Facebook time, so on and so forth.
With the newer technologies that we were talking about, that is instantly available. So you can set up all the rules that you want. And I will tell you that when my children got to be about 30 years old, I found out what they did when they were younger. But when you find out something new is happening, you can change it very quickly, like instantly. So there are those things.
Tom, you wanted to relate an experience. No, we're good there. We're already at the questions part, which is good because that's what we're doing. Uh-oh, look out.
I just want to kind of relate what I went through when I got into the municipal business, and it wasn't here. I worked 30 years for Illinois Power. We were a gas and electric utility, and I left them and went to Dynegy Incorporated in Houston, Texas. That kind of fell through, and I ended up in Harlan, Iowa. And Harlan, Iowa is a community of 5,300 on the far western side of the state, about 50 miles from Cornhusker country. And we were in what's called the designated market area. Everybody's assigned a designated market area, and we got into a lot of conflict of being able to provide Iowa State games to our customers because we were in the Omaha designated market area and we had channels. But to make a kind of give you a feel for what's going on over there, we bought our original bandwidth from Pioneer Holdings, later known as Long Lines LLC, out of Sergeant Bluff, Iowa, at $350 a meg. $350 a meg. We got that down. We joined another utility by the name of Walnut Communications. They were a small independent company. We put a fiber line between us, and it went from $350 to $200. When I left, it was about $20 a meg that we were paying. We converted our system from analog to digital, and we held a analog system in place until all of our older customers were able to convert to digital TVs because we had an older population. I paid less money, had better service, and that may have had something to do with the fact that I'm a boss, but when I called up and said I have a problem, I get taken care of pretty quickly. I come to Maquoketa. I signed up with Mediacom for cable TV and internet. It took them 12 days to come to my house and hook me up. They didn't have to run anything outside the house, 12 days. I can tell you right now, if you lived in Harlan, Iowa, and there was a line in your house, if we weren't out there that afternoon, we'd be there the next day. I had 5 service calls in the first 3 months with Mediacom. Every time I called in, you started talking to a computer, and you had to fight and fight and fight. Once you got to a human being, you got your problem taken care of. I then have, and I continue to have problems with speed on my internet. I signed up for their land-based telephone system, voice over internet protocol. Waited another 12 days. It worked intermittently for 2 weeks. It didn't work at all for 3 weeks. My wife accidentally cut a line working in her flower garden next to the house. The Mediacom line was buried 3 inches. We don't bury anything in Harlan that shallow, 3 inches. The man came out 2 months ago and spliced it together, said we'll be back in 2 weeks to put a new line in because this line's too old-fashioned and it doesn't carry the load you have. We're still waiting. I'll guarantee you, if we have that, if we get into the telecom business here, that's not going to be the way we do business. Because I'll be standing here listening to you tell me about what's going on, okay? Secondly, I'm not going to sit here and guarantee there won't be blackouts on cable because they just happen. The contracts do control it. And if we wanted to provide video, we would probably look at either Muscatine or Cedar Falls, and it depends upon what they have. We would have to sign transition contracts of our own. ESPN, for example, tells you, you sign one contract with them, you're going to take about 5 channels, and you're going to run them at these prices, and everybody's going to pay for them. Doesn't make any difference whether they have that package or not. Everybody's going to pay for it because they charge for subscribers. And on top of that, they tell you how you're going to list them in sequential order in your channel lineup. Now, one thing we did in Harlan, and I think they're still getting by with it, is we tried to put stuff sequentially, all the off-air channels, which is your ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, the sports channels. We didn't take Turner Classic Movies, for example, and put it over here that you had to buy the HBO package. It was in your extended or family basics. So I think I had no experience at all in this, and I'm still not an expert. But I'm here to tell you this will benefit your community, our community, because I live here. But I'm like 20 days away from being 71, so I'm not going to be around that long. But if you let this pass through your hands, you're going to wish that you had done it in the future.
I just like the fact that we'd be able to come and talk to you about, say, hey, these are the channels we want. You know, if we put together this package, we're not going to have to deal with somebody over in India or over in China that we can't understand. We can come and talk to you or come down here to City Hall and say, hey, guys, this is kind of what the people are wanting. Yep. We put together this package and how much it's going to cost. And I think the people would really enjoy that, being able to customize what they want on their TV, not let some outside company come in and say, this is what you're going to get, this is how much you're going to pay.
When I first came here, one of the first things I did was went on and talked to Loris because of my experiences with Mediacom. We were talking about possibility of getting together on our own. Now, I want to say, my opinion is, if the Iowa Fiber Alliance doesn't go, I don't think we can afford to do this on our own. Now, my board may tell me differently, but in Harlan, we had our own head in. That's a lot of money. And it's constantly, you're buying new DVRs, new remote controls. We would buy DVRs and we would spread them out over 3 years, and in 18 months they were dying. And this is the newest equipment that was out there, Motorola and boxes like that. So if you have to provide your own head in, it's a much, much riskier venture than what we're talking about here. Right. And in fact, with this particular venture, if we took video, we would probably have the DVRs on the cloud. We wouldn't even have boxes to give out. So.
Right. Say from the city end, I mean, I've heard some numbers. I've got some emails, and I've seen some numbers. And this is kind of what I was told. To get this through, it'd have to be somewhere in like the $8 to $9 million range to have you guys come in and do the infrastructure, bury the cables, and so on and so forth. Now, from the city of Maquoketa, we just passed our downtown project. We've got a bunch of street projects going, and we've got a lot of money spent. So, you kind of answered a little bit of this question earlier to kind of get like the hospital involved and some of your other, like say your libraries, some other stuff, some other boards to kick in some money. The biggest thing I can see this not getting through is just that big $8 to $9 million. This is how much we're going to have to pay because everybody doesn't want to have to come out of the taxpayer dollar.
Right.
So is there, I mean, other than, say, getting involved with your hospitals and your other stuff, can you guys give some ideas on how we could help pay for this?
Yeah, I'd like to at least put some of those numbers in perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Curtis ran the video from Sandy, Oregon, okay? And Sandy, Oregon has a population of about 10,000 people, and you have a population of about 6,000, okay? The comment that I heard, and it was just off of this evening, is that they went out for a bond that was $7 million. If you, with 10,000 people, if you just did some kind of rough math and said, okay, we got 60% of that number, it'd come out to about $44.3 million, okay? Now, you would be foolish to take numbers that I'm going to give you right now and think that they're absolutely real without doing the work that is necessary to get that. But Tom had asked me a while ago, he said, can you give me some rough idea what this would be? And $8 to $9 million probably includes the cost of a head end and other kinds of devices, right? So I did a rough calculation on what the high-end cost would be for you, and I was higher than $4 million and so on. I came up with a number. Don't hold me to it, okay? That was about $5 million, okay? But let's put it into some kind of perspective. What really happens with these particular builds is that you usually go about funding them in various different ways, and there are a lot of people out there right now that you can go to and talk to. We're talking to a number of investors right now relative to the IFA, right? And the answers that I'm getting from most of them is there's a lot of money out there just sitting around waiting because they're not real excited about having to collect 0.1% in a money market fund, So.
I've also heard of other cities that, say Maquoketa would come up short on the money or whatever. There'd be other cities that would want to loan the money to us, possibly like at a very, very low interest rate, so that way we can get on board with them. Because, if we're all in that big loop together, we can work together, streaming the videos, so on and so forth.
So that's where it is. But I'd like to take the big number and bring it down to something that's a little more concrete, okay? For most communities, when they're taking a look at these kinds of numbers and they're going through the financing, the actual bond cost, in other words, paying the money back, runs about $15 to $18 per month per house, okay? That's a rough number. So usually they talk about doing their own operations, and that doubles that number, okay? Those kinds of costs. Or you can look at a number that says, what is the cost to hook up a house? And that typically, if you're talking about fully hooking up a house, all the kind of normal stuff, that runs maybe $2,200 to $2,500. Now, I don't know about you, but when they did street improvement in front of my house, it cost me that, and I couldn't watch TV off of it at all, So, these sound like big numbers, but in truth, they're not really, because you're going to spread that cost over 20, 25 years, whatever, right? And so, when you look at that, you say the life of the fiber is at least 30 years, so spreading it over that period of time isn't so much of an issue, right? So, those big $8 million, $9 million, $10 million numbers, whatever they might be, are probably not that high, and they really should be kind of pulled back to say, what does it really cost you at your own home? If you had $2,500 over 25 years, you'd be talking about $100 a year is what the bond cost is. And
the reason why I said that is I do not
Yeah.
Great thing for our community. I just don't want them to see that big number and be like, well, we can't afford that because this is a downtown project. But I feel we can afford this. I do it just for what we're going to get out of it, the possibilities of it.
Yeah. I'll give you one other little thing that I do a lot of feasibility studies, right? And so when you do feasibility studies, it's how much revenue is coming in and how much am I going to spend and all that kind of stuff. But the Federal Communications Commission does an annual report on the competitive cost the cost reduction in communities that is seen when you've got competition from municipalities. The average, okay, over a long period of time is about 15%, okay, cost reduction. I've never seen a municipality that's that low. It's usually more like 40%. But if you take the 15%, just be nice and conservative with it, okay? The money that goes back to the community in 5 years at 15% is usually more than the cost of the capital build. So, over 25 years, you're going to get that back 5 times, right?
So I pass the mic over to Todd. He wanted to add something. I just want to make sure people understand a network like this is generally not built with tax dollars. It's generally built with revenue bonds. The utility borrows money and pays it back on the revenue the utility earns. You can do it with tax bonds, but that requires another vote of the people. And most communities don't go that route because they know the taxpayer does not want to have that burden. So these networks are operated and built without any impact on taxes. Todd.
I'd just build on that discussion that presuming that your community wants to have this over the next, those kind of services, whether it's an investor-owned utility such as Mediacom or municipal, that you want that over the next 30 years. So typically what you see, investor-owned utilities go out to the bond market, just like the municipal would. They have expectations, though, from their stockholders that they earn a higher rate of return on that borrowed money. So not only do they have to borrow money at higher interest rates, but then they have to collect more from you over that same 30-year period. It doesn't show up in your community's balance sheet, but if you want those services and you want to live here the next 30 years, you make those payments. And typically they would be at 5 to 6% interest, and they want their money back after 10 years. And then for the next 20 years, they keep collecting the money from you, and you get no service upgrades. Does that sound like maybe what's happened in the last 30 years? Yeah. Okay, so your muni system on the pricing, you get to control what you want that payback period to be. And Denola went with 3.5% over 14 years because it was reasonable, and it was going to extend out to maybe 20 years and maybe 3%. Now, if you can borrow money at historically low interest rates today and lock that in, then really what you're doing is you're hedging that lock-in of the value to the community. And yes, you do have a large upfront number. But if you're getting maybe a third of that back in higher property tax values, you're paying yourselves. I mean, that's something that you have to think about. $1,000 a house increase in value pays part of your own money back. It just shows up in different places. But being able to control that payback schedule and that rate of return back to yourselves makes a dramatic impact on what your technology cycle is over a 30-year period.
I'm going to throw it to Loris, our visitor from the Northeast.
One more comment, then I have to leave because my wife texted me and said she's out of money at Walmart, so I have to go. So having me in Maquoketa tonight has helped your local economy. So fiber is already helping your town. So having said that, I guess the last points I wanted to make was, Mediacom is the big beast that everybody talks about. Bellevue was fortunate we didn't have to go up against a Mediacom, but the real simple question that I'd throw out to all of you, a couple questions is Mediacom still run by Rocco? Is that okay? Mediacom's run by a guy named Rocco Mediate. Is that his last name?
Camiso.
Okay. So do you really want to depend on a company that's run by a guy named Rocco? I think he's not worrying. Who worries more about your community? Would it be Mediacom or would it be the city of Maquoketa? And the other thing I'd throw a challenge out to you is, do you want the city of Bellevue to be ahead of Maquoketa? I mean, can we do something that you guys can't get done here? We look forward to the partnership we would work with Tom. He's very forward-thinking. Our utility board is committed to the Iowa Fiber Alliance. I think we can say we were the first one to commit. So we're the first one to commit. Here in another 30 to 60 days, we will be showing video from Cedar Falls Municipal Utilities. So it'll be 20 miles away from you guys. That's where our video feed will come from. So it's possible. You can do it. And Bellevue's about 2,200 people. I would say in a second, it's not been all roses. There's been a lot of headaches that go with it. If Tom's 71, I'm wondering why he's so anxious to get into the headaches. But I'm 24 years old, and look what I look like. I'm a little older than that, but it's a challenge. I'm not saying it's all easy. It'd be a lot of work for your city to do this. But I think the investment to your community, the payback would be tremendous. You talked before, my son's a huge sports fan. And, you know, in Bellevue, if he wants to go on, he can stream a video for any football game. He loves football. Think of streaming it at 1 meg or streaming it at 25 meg. The viewing experience changes dramatically. And yeah, you can stream anything, but it's pretty cut up. And then when it says buffering and slowly you get in the picture and, okay, the guy was on the 5-yard line, and when it comes back on, he's on the 50-yard line. And those are the things that you need the bandwidth. Now, I would tell you on the video side, there's a lot of rules. Programmers are dominating the video market. You know, we're in the cable business. When I saw the hands go up that said they had cut the ties, so I don't say that lightly, but the future is the bandwidth to the house. And actually, we've never gotten into the phone business, but the phone business isn't nearly as profitable as it used to be, too. Well, the biggest challenge I would tell you is there is no off-the-shelf. You don't call somebody and say, we want to build a telecommunications system. You put bits and pieces and packages together. I would tell you, because of our inexperience, lack of options, we had a lot of hiccups because we took the best that was available at the time. And partners we had were excellent partners. It was just the best that was available, and our options were somewhat limited. And then what we learned as we moved through the years is there was maybe better options, or maybe it would have been smarter to go it with you right away. And the guy said, when you build, well, it's stupid because I should have bought this the first time. We made some mistakes. Some of the companies we dealt with, their product maybe wasn't as advanced as we thought it would be. You know, you depend a lot, going back, how simplistic our system. Takes care of. Even this, basically told the guy, said, we were doing computer guy involved. And now you look back and it's like, it's all networking, it's all computers. You know, you don't have to be a video expert. We had a coaxial system. It was so simple. It's complicated. Well, you'd be able to turn to my consultants for advice. If you ask me for advice, you are in trouble. I can tell you how to pay for a system. I don't know a thing about running it. Now, the guys have shown me just enough knowledge to be dangerous, to be honest with you. I understand when the O&T is malfunctioning, what the problem is. But to tell you, this business, and Tom's in this business too, we put a water main in the ground. 50 years later, we worry about it. We put a sewer main in the ground. 50 years later, we worry about it. We do electric transmission grids. Okay, you do a fiber optic system, you worry about it next year. We're totally changing out our technology here. All the ONTs, the optical network terminals that are going on the houses, they're 7 years old, and we're replacing every one. So it's a little different than some of the businesses we've been in. The other thing is there's no competition in sewer, there's no competition in water, there's no competition in electric. There's competition in cable TV and internet. So that's a little bit different for our city council and our utility board. You know, you can set your electric rates, and I know you guys about electric rates, but it's a little bit of a captive audience. And you know, you trust your council and your utility board to set prices to pay for the system, but be reasonable. It's a whole different business when you start providing the internet, and there's 3 other providers that can provide it. And we have no contracts. Our customers, we do free installation. If the second day they decide to go to DirecTV, okay, I just lost the money on that, and I have no contract. You know, we give on the internet, we give you free the first 30 days free. So we'll run it to your house, we'll do everything, and on the 29th day you say, thanks, but we're going to go to somebody else. That's the price of it. Now, I would tell you that we do not have a history of losing customers. We did it one time. When we first came out with our system, we had some technology that just wasn't up to standards, and we lost customers. Internet market right now, and once they go onto our system, they don't leave. Because we give bandwidth that the local telephone company is not able to provide in many cases. Well, yeah, and like Chris said before, the knock isn't on private companies here. The return on the investment for a private company in a town like Bellevue, it's just now they're big on their map. You know, Windstream is our telephone provider. I don't think somebody at Windstream is sitting in a corporate office somewhere saying, you know, we could make a lot of money if we build a fiber system in Bellevue. Hey, it's just not, they don't care. I mean, it's not worth the investment. I was in private enterprise most of my life. It's got to be a return on investment, and it's just not there. So your local company, the luxury they have is you got to pay for it. I'm not saying you're a nonprofit, but you don't have to send a check to a board of directors in New Jersey and say, here's your share for the year. So all you got to do is pay for it. And my city council gets paid about $1,200 a year. That's all they get paid. So, so that's what I wanted to say. I would encourage you guys. We'd love to be a partner in Bellevue with Tom and with Maquoketa. I'd encourage you guys to look at the options. And like I said, we've signed up for the Iowa Fiber Alliance. We're gonna go with it. And we got trust in those guys standing right there. So.
We're gonna stick around and answer a few more questions, but Karen's given me the evil eye over here. We need to. She's not. I'm just kidding. But we're going to turn off the recording now. So again, thank you everybody. And this recording will be placed on that website, the ourbroadbandfuture.com. So tell your friends if they didn't make it tonight, they can watch it later on the website.